Lydia.
Hi.
Great to have you here in this part of broadcasting that we're doing in Youth for SDGs and Youth Building the Future. Today talk is about global mental health.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, thank you for being here.
I'm Lydia. I'm from the United Kingdom, and I'm a student at the University of Sussex. I'm a student of international development, so I'm really interested in the SDGs, both critically and also in a positive way. And I'm also particularly interested in mental health and global mental health. And I'm a co-founder of an organization that specifically looks at leadership in global mental health. So that's a bit of a background about me.
Yeah, to all the people that's watching this transmission, we will share all the networks and all the information to stay in contact with all of you at the end of the transmission to keep this conversation open.
Sounds great.
So yeah, let's start talking about this. We both focus in sustainable development, and where we were talking before, we realized that talking about mental health, there's not any specific point, there are any specific indicators about global mental health. So first of all, and before going deep in that, I would love our friends to know more about sustainable development and the Sustainable Development Agenda.
Absolutely.
So do you want to share something about the Sustainable Development Agenda first?
Yeah, absolutely. So specifically about mental health, or just kind of in general, because you may be better at talking more generally than I am.
Yeah, okay. So I start talking generally, and I'll give you the point to mental health because
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that's what you're good at, or better. So when we talk about sustainable development, we talk that our world is living, the world that we're living in, it was made in a certain way, where we left the poor behind, where we left the disabled behind, and a world full of inequalities. So the Sustainable Development Agenda, it's trying to help improving a world and help a better world where no one is left behind. So the Sustainable Development Agenda is developed in 17, it's built in 17 SDGs, which are specific goals, such as I'm sharing my screen, as you can see here, quality education, gender equality, no poverty, zero hunger, clean water, because these points are a huge key to reduce these inequalities and improve people's life. And that's exactly an important point of what we're talking today here. Improving people's life, it's improving the world, and improving the society, well-being and healthy, the future for the next generations. So that's why we part from here, and specifically in good health and well-being. These goals, each we need to know how we're progressing in the actions that we're taking. So we have these targets and indicators. For example, I want to share this to start going deeper in the conversation, the 3.Y target, which is by 2030 to reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70% live births. And specifically in global mental health is 3.8, am I right?
3.4. 3.4.
3.4.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you
So
share?
I can talk a bit more about that if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So as you were saying, Roberto, the sustainable development goals are really like a comprehensive, I guess, toolkit to be used by countries to track and to keep on track with sustainable development. And particularly importantly is goal 3, which refers to health and well-being. And as the topic of this video is about mental health and global mental health, we are looking specifically at where mental health comes into goal 3, which refers to health and well-being, and it comes under 3.4, which essentially it says by 2030 reduce by 1/3 premature mortality from non-communicable diseases through prevention and treatment, and promote mental health and well-being. And while that's a bit like jargony, it essentially refers to reducing the burden of mental health globally, which sounds great, and I think it really does encapsulate in the target what does need to happen. However, I think, as we've discussed before, if we then look at the indicators to reach that goal of 3.4, which refers to mental health, it's really lacking much elaboration. And I think, as you see here, it really only refers to suicide mortality rate as an indicator for prevention and treatment and the promotion of mental health, which I think it really doesn't refer to mental health at all. Suicide mortality rate, while it does come under the guise of mental health and is a massive part of mental health, it is just one part of the incredibly large spectrum of mental health burden, mental health illness, mental health, daily kind of issues that people have and everyone has. So I think that's an important thing to pick up on there, is that suicide mortality rate just doesn't mental health.
Yeah, as we would talk before, these diseases are becoming more normal than ever. People are suffering from anxiety, from depression, and that's what we must be talking about more. Now we're facing the time that this broadcasting it's been recording. We're facing COVID-19, and we have millions of people segregated in their homes, and this is creating serious mental problems like anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we just look at the global burden of disease at the moment, mental health and behavioral problems come out as the largest burden of disease globally, everywhere in the world. And then for, breaking that down, major depression is the second leading cause of disability globally. It's a massive issue. And, like you were saying, even more so in the current circumstances, we're seeing, a global pandemic, and we're seeing, people's everyday lives changing drastically in a very short space of time, and that is having massive ramifications for all people. But I would say specifically for young people and for elderly people, we're seeing increased isolation, we're seeing potentially increased cases of domestic abuse where we're having to isolate potentially with people that cause harm to us, or people who cause emotional harm to us. So, there's a whole sort of plethora of things going on as a result of COVID-19. But even before that, the burden of mental illness has just been increasing yearly, not just in the global West, or not just, in a few handful of countries, but, I would say everywhere. So it's more important now than ever, I would say.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I found really, really, really interesting. You mentioned the word behavior. That's something it calls my attention, because what we do when we have these mental problems are reflected in the individual behavior, such as mass shootings. Someone does these mass shootings, which are more common than ever in the United States, for example, or the acts of terrorism all over Europe, in countries that we have never seen before. How are we treating these people that take action in the society? How is it reacting? We just argue to have stronger laws that take these people to jail, but we don't treat them mentally, we don't go on health. We don't treat it like a health problem. We treat it
Yeah,
differently. So
yeah,
that's really important to talk about it too.
yeah. I think that's a really important point. I mean, and it's a good example, and certainly one that has been occurring more recently in the past few years. We're seeing more and more cases of these kind of random attacks,
Yeah,
especially in the West and in Europe. And I think, again, I agree. I completely agree. I get frustrated when these things happen, and then the media takes hold of the kind of story. A lot of the focus is on the perpetrator and kind of the evilness of the perpetrator and so on, and I think it distracts from the fact that actually, potentially, not always, but potentially some of these actions could have been preventable through early recognition and treatment of mental health disorders and mental health illness. And I think that is really a failing on a more systematic level than on the individual level. I think, especially when we're looking at young people, as perpetrators of really horrific crimes, such as, terrorist attacks, what you see, and often you kind of, I think I have a particularly critical eye on it, is that, you look at these cases and you see this person who's being depicted by the media as evil and a menace to society, but actually, if you kind of take away all of that and all of the labels, it's usually a very vulnerable child, often from a minority or vulnerable background, who has faced, a massive amount of difficulty in their life, and then that's not to take away from the guilt that they have in those crimes. But I think it's really important when we're thinking about how governments deal with mental health and how healthcare systems deal with mental health, and the SDGs, in fact, the focus is on suicide. That's the final stage of mental health in many ways, and instead, we need to be thinking about early childhood development. We need to be thinking about adolescent development. We need to be thinking about transitions from school life to adult life, and all of those kind of things have with them these different sort of mental health focuses that I think really, if they're picked up on at an earlier age and dealt with at an earlier age, can be quite, can prevent a lot of issues that occur later in life. And I think another important thing kind of off the side of that is stigma. In a lot of societies, in fact, in most societies, mental health is still highly stigmatized, and even more so in specific cultures within different countries. So I think, what's important on one side of things is having a mental health system that is kind of governed by the government, that is not just a final stage sort of solution, but it's looking throughout the life cycle of somebody with mental illness, and then also thinking about how we can reduce stigma in communities, and those two together, I think, can prevent a lot of issues that we have.
Yeah, and you mentioned something really interesting here too. How are we treating this mental health awareness from school, from our own homes, and not only the government actions, but also the media action? You mentioned how childs are virtually this fragility that they have as childs. But I want to mention and bring to the table the Joker movie, which is something that media share and goes globally to talk about it, but I don't think we're talking about it in the right way. We see a child that's been abused, and at the end, he transforms into a monster. He transforms a society crisis, a disorder, completely disorder. But what could have been these preventing actions that we could take, especially as a younger generation, a generation of change? it's a key for us to understand these problems and the actions that we personally can take.
Yeah, absolutely. I think focusing on like child and adolescent mental health is so important, and especially in kind of in sort of recent um, especially in recent sort of generations, you know, we're seeing increased use of technology, increased use of social media, and kind of a move away from perhaps the childhoods that were being lived 30, 40 years ago. And I think there's been a lag in the catch up of understanding the implications of these changes to childhood, you know, in every setting, but particularly in higher income settings. You know, you're seeing children exposed to up to 16 hours a day of technology or screen time. And you know, you have increased violence in films, violence in video games. All of these things, you know, are really important, and there's some incredible work being done on you know, some incredible research being done on the impact of, for example, violent video games or violent films on children. And that work is just so important, and it couldn't be happening at a faster pace because, you know, like you said, for example, the film The Joker, you know, that I think really does encapsulate, you know, it is a Hollywood film at the end of the day, so it's dramatized and it's, you know, it's probably elaborated a bit, but it really
part
does.
of it is true.
Yeah, and it really represents, I think, in one way or the other, the experience of a lot of young people across the world, you know, and those voices are really not heard. And I've read a few articles and a few blog posts that responded to that film coming out, that were kind of trying to protect it by saying, you know, yeah, it's really violent, yeah, it's really horrible, and it's kind of quite you know, it's not an easy film to watch, but a lot of people were saying that's how I felt, that's what my childhood was like. And you know, I think it's really important to reflect on the positive impacts of media and social media that you know, can really bring people together in understanding, you know, understanding themselves and understanding these kind of big issues in mental health that aren't really discussed in any other way.
Yeah, because right now, the younger generation are facing this social media and these songs, music, movies, and different artistic and different kinds of expression that toggles them, and they are exposed to many different of contents. So I think that this technology, for example, these filters that they putting on time that a child can spend on a tablet or on the TV and the kind of content that they can access to, it's really important too. But we were talking these minutes about the importance of global mental health awareness and how it affects all society.
Yeah.
But a point that I want to highlight is that it's really important to start talking about global mental health from a sustainability point, because what we have in the Sustainable Development Agenda is these actions that can tackle the problem before it happens. This exposure and this vulnerability that people have, that children have, that poverty have, the idea is to help them. And it was really hard to watch. Yesterday, I watched a Jack Harris video that he shared from the Environmental Day, the Mother Day, Mother Earth Day, and it talks about how it was hard from a lot of people to think that we are joining to tackle a situation and act together. But I think it seems more possible each time, because people is realizing of the problems, and people also find themselves as part of the problem, but also as part of the solution. And that's something that we must fully understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important to if we look at, you know, the other sustainable development goals and the way that they're structured, you know, a lot of it is about improve, yeah, like you said, improving people's lives and improving the wellness, the wealth, the equality, and the you know, the like improving, you know, all aspects of life for people
Yeah.
globally. And I think that's what's really lacking in the sustainable development goal that refers to mental health. You know, suicide mortality rate is not helping people. You know, tracking that figure, that doesn't show us really anything. It doesn't show us anything about the global mental health burden and whether it's getting better or whether it's getting worse, because, you know, we could see a drop in the rate of suicides in a particular country, but a massive increase in the burden of mental health illness and the burden of potentially lower sort of impact mental health illness, such as like general anxiety or you know,
Depression.
those kind of things that people live with. No, you know,
Yeah.
people don't commit suicide, but they live with and potentially live with for decades or their entire life. And I think, you know, that's really worth highlighting is how the other SDGs have been structured in comparison to the way that
The ways
that
are
mental health
interconnected.
has been dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually just recently reading an interesting article that was kind of trying to make the point that mental health really underpins every other sustainable development goal. You know, without mental health, we cannot achieve the other sustainable development goals,
Yeah.
because, you know, mental health underpins everything, as physical health underpins everything. You know, you can't achieve everything that you know is on the SDGs without having a certain level of physical health. And I think, you know, it's the same for mental health as well.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that part, which I also find really important. So we're almost running out of time. I think that to don't make this broadcasting too long, and better have a next another broadcasting soon.
Yeah,
So
absolutely,
if you want
absolutely.
to finish or get closer to the conversation, or something else you want to share, or something that people that's watching us, the children, the families, the mothers, brothers, that they have something, they have someone, they meet someone, or they themselves are facing depression or anxiety.
Yeah,
The first of all, it's an illness, so they must see a doctor. I think we are taking a step further, and we're talking about it, about
yeah,
global mental health, which was something we couldn't talk before. It was
yeah,
something that families don't share, that they, as you said, they keep for years, and that's what
yeah,
ends killing people's life.
yeah,
Uh, so
absolutely. I think, yeah, sorry, I think
uh,
it's really important to talk about stigma and to talk about, you know, how we can reduce stigma. That as community members, that is what our power is. You know, like mental health treatment is in some ways left up to government. It's left up to the higher powers that control where money's spent and what their citizens have access to. But stigma and community support is something that we can all get involved in, and we should get involved in.
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
We as citizens feel as part of the system. We have this so much needs about when success and money and this false story that we seen in Hollywood movies, as you said, and
mm,
and that's something that we must realize, that where we stand and where we want to go. Talk about individual happiness and success, but in a small from a small perspective, I think.
yeah, yeah. I think at the end of the day, you know, happiness and well-being is more important than material wealth and
Yeah,
possessions and so on. And I think, you know, that's something to always remember is that your mental health, it really should come precedent. You know, you should always look after your mental health more than having the best job or, you know, having the best house or anything like that. You know, you need to do what's best for your head and for your well-being.
Yeah, so as conclusions for me, thanks first of all for sharing this time with all of us. And I think that first of all, it's, as we said before, talk about this problem. Go and find someone to talk about it. There are groups of people that reunites and help each other. So that's a step. And if it's need, we need to see a doctor. We shouldn't be afraid, because most of people, of young people especially, might feel afraid. So I want to share a message that you shouldn't be afraid. And personally, I face anxiety, and it's a horrible thing when you are thinking that, when you have this feeling that you can find yourself. Normally you start feeling weird, and you said that you can handle it yourself, but sometimes you can't, and you need to go and visit a specialist. But that's okay for all people.
I think it's really important to you know, to go out and engage in communities and engage in talking about mental health, and engage with other people who are also passionate about it. Like, for example, we have the Global Mental Health Network, which is a group on Facebook that we set up to bring people together that are passionate about mental health. And that's something that, you know, if you are interested in mental health, you should definitely join, because we have people from all walks of life and different professions, different countries, who are all brought together by their passion for global mental health. And I think those kind of communities are really important to sort of hone in on the message that you're not alone in your struggle with mental health, and as a collective power, you know, we have immense power to bring to the table what really needs to be happening in global mental health.
Totally. So again, Lydia, thank you for your time, and for
Thank
all
you.
the people that it's watching us. We share all the information about this mental health group Lydia has, and all the people interested can join to the group and keep this conversation that we just have, which is much like the topic, but we want to keep trying to have this conversation and join more people to it. So all the information and films, books, and personal stories that you want to share or other people want to share will be displayed at the end of the video. So thanks again, and you want to share something else?
No, thank you very much for having me. I think this is an amazing thing that you're doing, and I think it's very important. And you should, you know, if you're watching this, you should definitely continue engaging in this conversation. It's more important now than ever to.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. Till the
It's
next
been great.
time.
Yes, until next time.